Welcome to First Words, a podcast presented by the First United Methodist Church of Florence. Today's message is brought to you by Associate Pastor Reverend Dr. Terry Stubblefield.
Good morning, church. 2022 is over and we're 15 days into 2023. You may have big plans for this year. Vacations, family events, work changes. You may have already forgotten your New Year's resolutions, and it's nearly time for taxes again. Today, our lectionary readings that Calvin read from Isaiah, from one of the Psalms, from 1 Corinthians, and the Gospel of John, all have a common theme. In this past year, in this year, have you heard God calling you? Will you hear God calling you? Are you listening for God to call you? Specifically, are you hearing God calling you to be an evangelist? In all of these verses that we've read, listen to what we read again. In Isaiah, the Lord called me, you are my servant. In the Psalm, the Lord helped me up and put me on solid ground. He put a new song in my mouth, and I said, here I am. I am happy to do what you asked me to do. In 1 Corinthians, Paul said, I am called to be an apostle of Jesus. And in the Gospel of John, we read, John the Baptizer told me, this is Jesus. So Andrew and I followed him. The theme in all of these Bible readings is that God is calling people, God is calling us to be servants, prophets, witnesses, apostles, disciples, preachers, evangelists, Christians, Jesus people. Do you want to be a preacher or a pastor or an evangelist? If I asked for a show of hands, there probably wouldn't be many. When we're talking to our children or our grandchildren about their future plans, their future vocations, do we talk to them about ministry, about being a minister or an evangelist, as well as thinking about perhaps being an accountant or a doctor or a lawyer or a business person? Well, why do we not do those things? To be truthful, the words evangelist, witness, servant are kind of scary. The words preacher, pastor, church leader may be scary words to you, because what do you associate with these words? You may think about preachers you see on TV, street corner preachers you encounter in town on Court Street, the person that sits beside you on an airplane and tries to talk you into accepting Jesus as your personal Savior, or that person that comes and knocking on your door hoping to persuade you to be a member of their church or their denomination or to accept Jesus as your Savior. A co-worker, a friend, a roommate, or a people that make you feel less than, less religious than they are. Well, most of these people, I think, are probably sincere, but sometimes some of these people may be misguided or sometimes even sad or embarrassing to people who truly follow Christ. Not all ministers can be quite as cool as Dale and I. Or Christians as cool as you guys are. But what if being an evangelist, a witness, or a disciple is not being a self-righteous, pushy, street corner, know-it-all, Bible-quoting, hard-to-like person? All these stories we've read today have the common theme of sharing the good news. Evangelism is sharing the good news. Last Sunday was Epiphany Sunday, and we're in the season of Epiphany. And Epiphany is a showing, it's a revelation, it's a manifestation. It's a season of sharing the good news that Jesus is Messiah and Savior. These Bible readings for today also show us that evangelism begins simply with paying attention and telling the story of God's love and what God's love does for me in my life. That's the story any of us can tell. John the Baptizer noted and told others that Jesus, He takes away sins. Andrew told Peter, we have found the Messiah. Later in the book of John, Philip said, we have found the one the prophets told us about. The psalmist said, God has lifted me up when I was down and out. He put me on a solid rock and put a new song in my heart. So paying attention to the way God shows up in our lives is where evangelism starts. And we can all do that. I think all of us, at different times in our lives, and it will happen again, have an experience of divine presence in our lives. That's an epiphany. It may have happened when you were baptized. It may have happened at your confirmation, in your wedding, at the birth of a baby, even in the death of someone that brings peace and comfort to that person and their family. We know that in lonely times when we view the vast sky, the moon and the stars, the grandeur of nature, the face of a friend, that we are not alone. That's an epiphany. Just like an epiphany that came into the lives of John the Baptizer and Andrew and Philip and John and the psalmist. An insight after an argument or when you have been wronged or when you've wronged someone is an epiphany. In moments of confusion and doubt, we have insights that God has not abandoned us. That's an epiphany. And epiphanies shape us to be more compassionate, more loving, and more accepting. Then our lives bear good news without saying a word. We're already evangelists. And that's what St. Francis meant when he said, preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. When God's love claims us, our very lives preach good news. But being evangelists, accepting God's call is also about giving voice to our stories. You don't have to be a theologian or memorize the entire Bible to be an evangelist. We only have to share our story. Not threats, but testimony. Not answers, but authenticity. The psalmist said, in my life, I was down and out and God rescued me, picked me up and put me on solid ground. John the Baptizer said, this is what I have learned about Jesus. Discipleship is also about learning. A disciple is a student. God's call is sharing what we learn about God and about ourselves with God in our life. With God in our life and what it was like with God not being in our life. Evangelists are students. Answering God's call, giving voice to God in our lives is part of evangelism. But so is being attentive and open to others. That's part of living for God. Listen to these verses again and listen to these words. Jesus saw John and Andrew. Andrew brought Peter to Jesus, and Jesus saw him. Jesus saw John and Andrew and asked them, what are you looking for? What do you want? What are you seeking? So today, what are you looking for? What are we seeking? These are the questions that go beneath the surface of our lives. Who has seen you and asked questions that go below the surface of your life? Who has invited you to come and see? Whoever these people are, they are the evangelists of the world. They bring the good news. They love because they've been loved. They welcome because they've been welcomed. They see because they've been seen. And they invite because they've been invited. That is hearing, accepting, and sharing God's call. That is being an evangelist. So maybe you are an evangelist. We all need to be evangelists. So be an evangelist. Pay attention. See. Share what God has done for you. What a difference God has made in your life. Learn more about God and others. Be open to others. Invite, welcome, and love. Be an evangelist. Be a Jesus follower. Be a Jesus person. Amen.
Thank you for listening to First Words. For more information about our services or how to get involved in our community, visit us at fumcflorence.org or facebook.com/FlorenceFUMC.